So, folks, let's talk about this meeting with Trump and Zelensky. I said that it was going to be bad. I said that I wouldn't trust Donald Trump to eat a McDouble and pull it off properly. And so I knew that this meeting was not going to be anything good. While it didn't go off the rails like the first one, and there wasn't those embarrassing moments, I still feel like there were embarrassing moments. And I also feel like it's very clear how that Trump and this administration is going about reshaping the narrative. They're all about that. And that's the most sickening part for me to sit back and watch, because Ukraine is an ally. They were invaded by a dictator. It shouldn't even be this way. This isn't how it should have ever been. We should have been standing up for our friends. We should have been right there with them every step of the way. And instead, now we have a president who's going about reshaping the narrative. And while he may not have screamed in his face, "You don't have the cards" these times, there were still underhanded ways that they went about reshaping that narrative. So, of course, one of the things that Donald Trump kept circling back to in this meeting is one of his favorite hits: everything is Joe Biden's fault. Take a look.
As you listen to Russia and Ukraine, which side has the better cards?
Well, I don't want to say that. I'm just here to be, look, this isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war. He's the one that had a lot to do with this happening, and we want to get it ended. And we want it to end good for everybody. We want it to end good. The people of Ukraine have suffered incredibly.
So it's Joe Biden's war? Really? Actually, he was supposed to have this ended before he took office on January 20th. He said he would end the war as president-elect. And so this meeting in and of itself is an utter failure on Trump's part, because according to him, it was all supposed to be over while he was still president-elect. Now, the first go-around with Zelensky, we saw the humiliating moment where Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend made fun of him for not wearing a suit, and everyone got onto him back then for that. And so they bring that point up, and Zelensky actually gets a really good burn in on Marjorie Taylor Greene's little bitch here.
Yes, sir. I've got a question for each of you.
Yes.
First of all, Mr. President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good on
I
you.
said to the one that attacked you last time. See, now I remember that.
I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
And in the same suit. You see, I changed, you are not.
Maybe yours is much better.
That was pretty damn funny. I changed and you did not. You're in the same suit. But I got to pull up this post from Marge, and then we're going to talk more as we go about how they're shaping this narrative. They always find a way to get in their jabs one way or the other at Zelensky, and I want to bring this up, this ridiculous thing that she posted over on the dumpster fire that is Twitter. She said, "I'd like to recognize Brian Glenn TV for his success in upholding the proper White House attire." She really needs to call up her old buddy Kid Rock. She really needs to have a conversation with him, going in there looking like he's Ricky Bobby or some shit. If Brian had never asked Zelensky the question, "Why don't you wear a suit? Do you own a suit?" I'm sure he would have never wore one to visit our great and respected president. So they have to find a way to get in their jabs. They have to find a way to take a jab at a man whose country was invaded by a war criminal. And I'm going to keep circling back to that point, because they've completely lost the plot on this one. And we have to remind them of what it is that we're up against. But they go right in next to, I want to play this next clip here, because they asked Trump about the mail-in ballots. And now that he is saying he's going to sign an executive order to get rid of mail-in ballots, he's basically taking orders straight from Vladimir Putin. Check this out.
You pushed out on social media about doing away with mail-in ballots and potentially electronic voting machines. Can you expand on that and how important
Well,
that is?
that's a very off-topic, just really quickly. Mail-in ballots are corrupt. Mail-in ballots, you can never have a real democracy with mail-in ballots. And we, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots, because they're corrupt. And you know that we're the only country in the world, I believe, I may be wrong, but just about the only country in the world that uses them, because of what's happened. Massive fraud all over the place. The other thing we want change are the machines. For all of the money they spend, it's approximately 10 times more expensive than paper ballots. And paper ballots are very sophisticated with the watermark paper and everything else. We would get secure elections. We'd get much faster results. The machines, I mean, they say we're going to have the results in 2 weeks. With paper ballots, you have the results that night. Most people, but most people, many countries use paper ballots. It's the most secure form.
He's sitting there lying right through his teeth, and there's never any pushback. No one ever stands up and says, actually, Mr. President, countries do allow mail-in ballots. So does Russia. They never bring that point across. They just stand there and let this guy say that. He's always unchecked. He's always unchecked. The only people that holds him to account is people like us here on the internet. That's it. When he's standing there in front of the mainstream media, no one ever holds him to an account. And if they do, he ends up beating them into submission and they tap out pretty quickly. But no one ever pushes back, and especially when he just goes right here and says the quiet part out loud. Listen to what he says.
The Republicans have to lead the charge. The Democrats want it because they have horrible policy. If you have mail-in voting, you're not going to have many Democrats get elected. That's bigger than anything having to do with redistricting, believe me.
You can literally hear the frustration in his voice because he knows that Gavin Newsom is coming after him now, and he cannot stand getting a dose of his own medicine. And so he's basically saying right there, I'm getting rid of mail-in ballots because a lot of Democrats vote that way, and so I'm going to suppress the vote. The guy is saying right out loud that he's rigging the game. He's not even trying to hold back, or he doesn't have to anymore. If you think about it, he truly doesn't have to anymore. He's free now to just go ahead and go for it. There was another clip here I was going to play you. I want to show you a couple more clips actually, but I want to show you the way that Fox News is spinning this narrative. And like I said, that meeting might not have went off the rails the way the first one did, but Fox is still here to belittle and get their jabs in. And of course, here comes Jesse Waters talking about how that Zelensky really stepped it up this time and showed respect. He minded his P's and Q's. This is so sickening. Take a look.
Should we care what another man wears? Well, it's not about the fit, it's about the respect. And Zelensky stepped it up. After the blow-up, he was on his best behavior. He even remembered to say his pleases and thank yous.
Thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you. And using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States.
Z saw Vance in the room and wasn't ready for another tongue lashing.
They're so proud of themselves. They're so proud of themselves to sit and belittle this dude and sit there like, oh yeah, he minded his P's and Q's. That's our ally sitting there. And they're on the opposite side. And then I don't know what the hell this clusterfuck is.
Finally, we have to ask this tonight. WWJHD, what would Joe do? Well, as in Biden, of course, he could never have gotten this done. He spent 3 years cheerleading and funding the war with zero attempts at bold diplomacy.
JHD. I don't know. But anyway, what would he do? Of course, it's always Joe Biden's fault. That's the narrative. That's the way they're always going to spin it. And it's crazy to me that we live in a world where they've been able to pull this off with their followers and continue to brainwash everyone into thinking that Russia's on the right side of history here. They're not. We're always going to be here holding their feet to the fire. As far as the way Fox is going about spinning it, you're never going to hear them talk about this moment where Trump was caught on a hot mic. Yeah, he did not realize that his microphone was on. And he's right here saying, and I'll go ahead and tell you up front that the audio on this is low. So I've got the captions on the screen. You can read along with what he has to say. He's saying right out loud that he thinks Putin's ready to make a deal for him.
Set up a trilateral, you know. So, I think he wants to make a deal for me. You understand that? As crazy as it sounds. Just sit down. Sit down, everybody.
Okay.
I think we'll let the press come in for a minute.
Yeah, he wants to make a deal for me, as crazy as that might sound, and you won't hear an absolute peep out of Jesse Waters or anyone on Fox News. They'll never talk about that. It'll always be that they'll find a way to get their jabs in on Zelensky, and they'll always find a way to spin it against Joe Biden. when she says, what would Joe Biden do? Well, what would Fox News do if Joe Biden had this moment? Folks, I'm going to play you a moment here where Trump doesn't realize that the president of Finland is sitting right in front of him. And this is actually hard to watch. It's very cringeworthy, but I want you to take a look and ask yourself, what would Fox News have did with this had this been Joe Biden?
President Stubb of Finland, and he's somebody that, where are we here? Huh? Where? I'm right here. Oh, you look better than I've ever seen you look. But you've done a great job, and we wanted to have you here.
And folks, to be honest with you, I do try to not do whataboutisms, but it's really hard when you see someone have that massive of a blunder. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I ain't had those moments at my age. I've definitely had moments where someone was standing right beside me. Oh, there you are. We've all done that. But we just know for a fact that if it was Joe Biden, that would have been 3 weeks worth of news. We know Joe Rogan would have dedicated an entire 3-hour episode to talking about that blunder. And it was actually kind of painful to watch. Like, huh? Who? What? Where? And this is how close that the president was sitting, because you're probably wondering, well, now, wait a minute. In all fairness, how far away was he? Take a look.
Why is the president of Finland here? I think the reason is probably that we might come from a small country, but we have a long border with Russia, over 800 miles. And we, of course, have our own historical experience with Russia from World War II, the Winter War and the War of Continuation. And if I look at the silver lining of where we stand right now, we found a solution in 1944, and I'm sure that we'll be able to find a solution in 2025 to end Russia's war of aggression and find and get a lasting and just peace. The situation is very difficult, but that's why we're here.
Thank you, Alex, very much.
And he's referring to Finland getting their borders back in 1944. And, there he is. That's just how close he was to Trump when Trump made that blunder. But the biggest blunder of them all to me is the fact that European leaders are having to sit here and explain to Donald Trump just how serious this is. And they have to know coming into this guy is clearly on the side of Vladimir Putin. So is Fox News, and they make no apologies about it. They're clearly going out of their way to vilify President Zelensky. They're clearly going out of their way to make a hero out of Putin. And we live in a world now where an American president goes out and rolls over for a dictator. And now is creating an executive order to get rid of mail-in voting because a dictator who rigs his own elections told him to do it. He's saying all of this out in the open, and there's still people who will tell us that somehow we're creating hysteria and just trying to work up people and get them paranoid. That ain't going to happen. And my biggest pet peeve is the ones that will say, oh, they won't let him do that. Oh, he would never do that. But I would never say that. This is just me. Maybe this is a really radical way of thinking. I don't know. But if someone said to me, hey, the guy that you say you're going to vote for says he wants to be a dictator. The guy that you say you want to vote for, he pals around with dictators and praises them to the moon. And he said that he's going to get rough with his own people. And he said he's going to do all these things. I wouldn't say, oh, I don't think he'd do that. They won't let him do that. I would say I would never vote for a motherfucker that did that. That's what makes no sense to me. Well, they won't let him do that. Well, but you're going to vote for him and he's saying he's going to do it. So either you're not listening to him, either I'm listening to him more than you are, or you just don't care. And I think it's the latter. At the end of the day, they just don't care. They're loving this. Why? Because they have more in common with Vladimir Putin. That's why MAGA cheers him on. That's why he's really the one running the show. For years, they sat back and said, who's running the show with Biden? Jamie, pull it up. Who's running the show? Who's running the show now, Joe Rogan? Tell me that. Tell me who's running the show now when we have an American president going out and bowing down to a dictator and taking orders from him. Who's running the show now?